the health impacts as a result. But now we have so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for all being here today in this beautiful weather in Williamsburg, my home neighborhood where I was born and raised, standing next to Jaime Campiz Playground, better known as green grass by the residents of Williamsburg. If you are born and raised in Williamsburg, you're born into environmental justice. The health risks here have made us climate advocates from the start. We've been dumped all our lives, whether it's oil spills, waste transfer stations, or the topic of today, the BQE. In the 1940s, the infamous urban planner known as Robert Moses toured through communities in North and South Brooklyn to build the BQE. This roadway not only split these communities, but also subjected working class neighborhoods in Brooklyn to decades of toxic pollution, poisoning generations of residents. Only one neighborhood was spared this same scale of destruction, Brooklyn Heights, when a triple cantilever was built to allow the BQE to run along the neighborhoods, edge underneath homes, buildings, and a public promenade. The same can't be said about other portions of the BQE. Parks line the BQE here in Williamsburg, where we grew up, playing here and sucking the fumes and dealing with high asthma rates and other health impacts as a result. But now we have an opportunity with the passage of a once-in-a-generation infrastructure bill by the federal government to remedy the environmental injustice that was imposed upon us. Since the passage of the bill, City DOT has been working tirelessly to ensure that they secure some of this funding for the Brooklyn cantilever portion of the BQE. The same cannot be said about the State Department of Transportation. Just last week, the state publicly confirmed that they have no plans whatsoever to address the state-owned portions of the BQE to the north and south with federal infrastructure funds. This position condemns the vast majority of the corridor that has divided the neighborhoods, has brought in toxic pollution and a lower quality of life. And it's no coincidence that these neighborhoods are the ones that are black, brown, and poor, also AAPI communities. But this is not about division. From Greenpoint to Brooklyn Heights, from Bay Ridge down further south, we are unified, and we are all claiming or all stating that we want to see a corridor-wide plan. And it needs to happen now. We don't want to be collateral damage any longer. This is our chance to deliver justice, and no one organizes better than Brooklyn. So you can expect a fight. We cannot miss this opportunity to address the harms of the past, and finally make no mistake that New York State here is to blame. The state DOT and our governor has decided to relegate these communities to continued injustices on our environment. Our kids will continue to have to play on either side of the BQE sucking in these fumes. We're going to have to continue to deal with a highway on top of a highway on top of a highway, while the Brooklyn cantilever in the area that is more affluent gets a brand new redesign. We've been joined by Brooklyn Heights in asking for a corridor-wide vision. And the mayor's office is only accountable for dealing with the cantilever, but the state is who is accountable for the northern and southern portion that, again, are poor black and brown and AAPI communities. And the state will not stand idly by as we're here defending and finally getting an opportunity to change this horrible history that Robert Moses has imparted on us. So we're calling on the state to do something different, or we will shut it down. We're not going to allow for the city to move forward with its portion if the state doesn't come through and also commit to fixing the northern and southern portions and take care of the injustices that were created decades ago. And in that fight, we have Our local council members from the northern portion of the BQE in the south side of Williamsburg and in Greenpoint that have joined us here today, and we want to call them up. I want to thank them for being here. And we're going to start off with the local council member, Jennifer Gutiérrez.
Thank you, Borough President Reynoso. Thank you for convening us. Thank you for reminding us exactly what we got sent to office to do, whether it's at City Hall, Borough Hall, or Albany. And I know you have the entire borough to look after, but I can't help but give you special love for showing up for North Brooklyn once again. We'll never forget where you came from, so thank you. So we're all here because we jointly and unequivocally believe that the DOT is being negligent by choosing to parcel out their investment of their resources, of their time, and of this massive infrastructure bill to 1 mile in collaboration with the city DOT that is the cantilever. The state DOT is openly admitting that they have no interest in the remaining portion of the BQE, which, like the borough president said, not only covers different neighborhoods of Brooklyn and Queens, but different communities, all of which are environmental justice communities. And perhaps we need to educate the state DOT on what it means to be an environmental justice community. It means that since the BQE, since Robert Moses, it has been our communities that had to breathe the fumes, that have to deal with the environmental issues of this racist highway. It's us dealing with the risk every single day, and not state DOT. What it means to be an environmental justice community is to be unapologetic in what we demand and in the future that we see. For all of us, for many of us that are here, the damage is done. We don't stand here for ourselves, we stand here for our descendants, we stand here for our future. The cantilever, and I think the borough president talked about this, but the cantilever is a unique project. The BQE was very much intended to divide communities, displace communities. There still live people here in the South Side that can tell you what it felt like to be pushed out of their homes when they were living where the BQE stands now. But the cantilever was special in that it said Brooklyn Heights doesn't deserve an expressway. They will have it on the side, and what we know it as the promenade. So they were lucky then. And we've had to deal with the injustices ever since then. And what we're asking for is the state DOT to step up and to stop being negligent in looking at this investment as a holistic investment of the entire BQE. The BQE is one of the most heavily traveled roadways in the city. It carries more vehicles than many comparable highways. And what we're saying is that it doesn't just stop at Brooklyn Heights. It doesn't just stop in a particular area. It goes all from the south to the north and into Queens, and we must be responsible. If we're serious about our climate change goals, we must look at this holistically. So we demand that the state DOT does their job, that they come back into the community. It was no problem for them to show up to North Brooklyn when the then governor wanted to invest in the Kosciuszko Bridge, right? And repeatedly we try to bring them to the table to say, let's look at the rest of the BQE. Let's look over these street bridges of South 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And they said, no, every single time. You'll have your chance next time. This is our chance. And the longer that we wait and the longer that we don't hold state DOT accountable, we will continue to lose. Communities of color will continue to lose. So I thank Borough President Reynoso for being steadfast and never forgetting how important it is to support our EJ communities. And I thank all of you and our partners for standing with us and calling the same call to action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council Member. Can we just leave a gap here for people to stay on the sidewalk? They're going into the bike lane, and we got to be very careful. Thank you. Thank you.
Leave the strollers on the sidewalk.
Yes. Some folks follow regulations and rules when they're on their bikes, and we're very grateful for that. But now we have our council member from the northern portion of the BQE, whose community is also an environmental justice community, has suffered the same fate as the south side of Williamsburg. And I want to call up Council Member Lincoln Restler.
All right.
One thing that we all learned when we read The Power Broker is that highways can be racist. Infrastructure can be racist. The BQE is racist. It has caused enormous harm to communities all throughout Brooklyn. And as Councilmember Gutierrez noted, when it came to Brooklyn Heights the first time in the 1950s, the community organized, the community pushed back, and advocated for the BQE to go around the neighborhood. That is how the triple cantilever was created. But communities like the south side of Williamsburg weren't so lucky. If you walk up and down Marcy, you will see people living on top of the BQE, breathing in these horrible fumes each and every day. If you were to study, and many people have, the communities that live along the BQE, you will find an asthma belt. People are dying because of the BQE. This is our once-in-a-generation opportunity to fix this racist infrastructure. Yes, as Antonio mentioned when he was a council member, long before he was borough president, when the BQE issues came to City Hall and he was on the Transportation Committee, he said, yes, we need to fix the crumbling triple cantilever in Brooklyn Heights, but we cannot leave behind the South Side. We cannot leave behind environmental justice communities all along the BQE. We need to think corridor-wide in our solutions. So even if this mayoral administration were to step up with the transformative solution that we need in Brooklyn Heights, and they have not yet, but even if they were to maintain 2 lanes of traffic in each direction, not increase it to 3 lanes, if they were to cap the BQE structure and tunnel it effectively, it would not be enough. Because still here in Williamsburg, in the South Side, and in Sunset Park, and in Greenpoint, this highway is causing havoc. So we need to finally move forward with the BQ Green proposal and cover and green the highway here in the South Side. We need to bring it to grade in other parts of where this highway travels through the neighborhood. We need to start engaging our communities in rigorous planning, and we need, most of all, the state to come to the table. 1 mile out of 20 miles of the BQE is city controlled. The rest of it is the state. So if the state doesn't step up, we're not going to see any changes in 95% of the BQE. Last week, when Senator Gutierrez and Assemblymember Gallagher and many of our friends up in Albany called State DOT to question, they said, we're not touching it. We're not dealing with it. We've got bigger fish to fry. We're afraid of the BQE. They shouldn't be. They need to engage. We need their partnership. We need the city, the state, and the federal government all to step up together in partnership to realize the comprehensive solutions that are so badly needed to address the inequities and the harm that the BQE has caused for generations. We can do this. It's time for the state to step up as a partner. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Thank you. Now, when the BQE was constructed and the construction was happening, I was just a little boy, but somebody was here during the fight, and so many of these changes happened front and center. And we had things like a tunnel that I wasn't aware of that connected us from one neighborhood to the next. But I would say, to me, this is considered the other side, and I lived on that side. And depending on what side you live, the other side is the other side. And Evelyn lived on the other side of the South Side. And I want to call her up. She is a representative for Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez to call up your very own Evelyn Cruz.
Say that. Thank you. Thank you, Borough President. And thank you on behalf of Congresswoman Velázquez for bringing us together, and of course our champions at City Hall fighting for justice. The Congresswoman is tired of agencies like the New York State DOT trying to divide our city and our borough and our communities. We represented Brooklyn Heights last year, and we were fighting for the southern corridor of the BQE to also be revision in this plan. And today we continue to fight for the south side end of the corridor for justice. That's right. As our borough president stated, many of us were born and raised in this community. My family came here from Puerto Rico in the 1950s. We all grew up on these streets, South 1st, South 2nd, South 3rd, Hope, a few blocks from here. And I was telling him, I recalled when my mom brought me here at a year old, and I have a picture of her holding my hand, playing in this playground. And back then, we also had traffic. We had cars with high emission levels. And the issue is that at the end of the day, this park, like many parks in our community that have been impacted by the BQE, are faced with heating islands, especially in the summer. You can't play in these parks when the weather is 90 degrees. It is too hot because the emissions of the local trucks, the vehicles, everything impacts our quality of life. And I think that the borough president said it right as did our council members. This is nothing but an asthma belt. And as we know, that the highway was created just for a flight out of New York City by the affluent communities of New York City. The highway enabled the rich and famous to exit to Long Island, to the Hamptons, and out of the urban communities at the expense of the most vulnerable, the low-income Latinos and African-American communities that were living here back then. The Congresswoman is saying that to date, $9.6 billion in partisan infrastructure funding was announced and is headed to New York City. New York State will be receiving approximately $8.4 billion for transportation to invest in roads, bridges, and public transit. It is critical for New York State DOT to address the issue that we're asking. Now, New York State has the opportunity to right an environmental injustice and include the BQE North and the BQE South of the cantilever into its revisioning plan. It is important that we consider these impacts and take steps to mitigate them, improve the air quality, and reconnect communities. We need to take back our park space. We need to ensure, as the Borough President stated, that these racist policies end now. We attempted to do that when we started with the Kosciuszko Bridge project, and we were unable to move forward. But today we're saying there's infrastructure funding, and we're not going to take this sitting down. We're going to fight back, and we're going to urge the state to do the right thing. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes. So what you're hearing so far is that all we're doing is relegating these communities to continue with the racist infrastructure, right? We're regurgitating Robert Moses policies that are no good and that have done us all this harm. We're saying that Robert Moses got it right. Is that what the State Department is saying? And that's how we feel. We feel that in areas like Brooklyn Heights, they keep getting more, while places like this keep getting less, and that the state is okay with that. And I want to be very clear. The Brooklyn Heights Promenade needs replacing, but we also need replacing here.
Right.
This is not only an infrastructure issue, this is a health issue.
That's right.
And we have people dying at higher rates north and south of the corridor during COVID, specifically because of these health outcomes. So while infrastructurally, we can have a terrible occurrence on the cantilever, health-wise, we're having terrible occurrences here every single day. And we can't excuse or separate the type of lives that we're losing for different reasons. One can be because of, again, infrastructure and traffic crashes or infrastructure concern. Another is health outcomes that we've plagued this community with for decades since Robert Moses put this in there. It's just about time we do something different. And we're very grateful because along these fights, it's the residents of this community that always come up, show up, and stand up. And we have an organization that has been with us from day one, that has been fighting these fights, and that has so much of their policies are based on the unusual health outcomes or unjust health outcomes of North Brooklyn. So I want to call up, today we have Frank Lang, who is the Deputy Executive Director for Housing of St. Nick's Alliance. Frank Lang.
Thank you very much, Borough President. I want to echo what others have said, but I want to point out a few other things. This BQE has hundreds of thousands of residents live on either side of this corridor. That's a phenomenal amount of people that are impacted by the people traversing the corridor who don't live here. We see that these are the fastest growing in terms of population in the city along this area. And that means more and more impact. So we ask the governor to be brave, to have a vision and look to the future and try and see how she can help the mayor and us all make this place a better place to live so that we can keep people in the city and continue to grow in a positive way. And it can't grow in a positive way if our kids are playing with the exhaust of trucks and cars around us. So we advocate and work very hard. We represent a lot of the residents here, and they will be working with the electeds to see how we can make change. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Frank. At the hearing where the state DOT said that they weren't interested in supporting the northern and southern portions of the BQE with federal funding, was our Assembly member, Emily Gallagher, and our representative is here today, Andrew Epstein. Andrew?
Thank you so much. Thank you all so much. My name is Andrew Epstein. I'm Chief of Staff to Assembly Member Emily Gallagher. She's a member of the Transportation Committee, and she's in Albany today. And last week, as a member of that committee, when she had an opportunity to ask New York State DOT, are you at the table? Are you engaged on this process to rethink the BQE? She brought to that question a lot of accumulated frustration and many years before joining the Assembly, working and following the lead of so many folks behind me now to try to bring them to the table, and continually being rebuffed and denied. But she had hope last week at this hearing, given the opportunities we have with federal infrastructure money, given the city process that New York City DOT has engaged in. She asked them, what is your plan for this destructive, harmful infrastructure at a time when a third of our state's emissions come from the transportation section? When we know the racist harms of this infrastructure, that it divides our communities, what is your plan to join the city at the table to seize the moment on this federal infrastructure moment and the urgency of the cantilever? And we all know what their answer was. Yes. We have no plan. We're gonna patch up a few potholes, we're gonna fix a few ramps, but we're perfectly content leaving this infrastructure for the next generation and generations to come. But we're here to say, and Emily asked me to deliver this message in particular, not gonna happen. We are not gonna kick the can down the road any further. We're going to tackle this racist infrastructure once and for all, and we're gonna bring New York State DOT to the table as soon as we possibly can. So thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much. Woo! Thank you so much. And we just, before we get to questions, we just want to acknowledge the fact that we've also been joined by Assemblymember Maritza Davila, State Senator Julia Salazar, State Senator Kristen Gonzalez. Their offices are here. So we're going to open it up to questions. Anyone have any questions? Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate this. Thank you all to the elected officials and the organizations that are with us today. And let's hope this makes a difference. Thank you. All right. Good job.